everyone. I wanted to reinforce the readings that you did on transfer enhancement procedures and to go over each of these interventions in particular in more detail so that you would have this information for when you're reviewing your class notes and when you're thinking about these topic areas. So as you'll recall, transfer of training is simply the idea that things that are learned in formal training sessions or workshops are not always transferred or applied to the work setting. And there are many reasons for this, and some of it has to do with the way in which the material is learned, some of it has to do with the application environment. Now, we talked a fair amount about transfer climate, the idea that there is a culture, a larger culture within an organization and a specific climate setting within an organization that either supports or inhibits the application of new material or supports or inhibits learning in general. If you have a transfer climate that is supportive, where there's opportunity to use the newly learned skill, that people help identify spaces in which the new skill or idea might be applied, where supervisors are supportive of the application of the newly learned technique, skill, knowledge, whatever it might be, where peers and subordinates are also supportive. These types of environments support transfer and allow for transfer even in the absence of these transfer enhancement procedures. So it's really when you know that somebody is going back to a difficult environment, or when the task itself is going to be difficult to transfer. There's a skill that for one reason or another is difficult to apply. You might want to spend some time considering how you might enhance or support the employee's ability to transfer the newly learned material. I offer you here 4 different techniques that come from the literature, actually, that come from research. These are techniques that have been widely studied. The first is a simple goal-setting technique. This is something that you know a fair amount about. This is the idea that if people set goals, it's motivational. It helps them to direct their effort. So it provides people with direction and with an awareness around how they might work towards an outcome. So goal setting can be an effective transfer enhancement procedure. The second is relapse prevention. Right, relapse prevention again is something that you know that you might know intuitively. It is taken from the addictions literature, as the term implies. Relapse meaning to go back to the old way of doing things, right? So it's very similar to you can think of it in those terms, in terms of planning for times when you think you might slip back into old habits. So you might think about where am I going to try and apply these skills? And what are the things that will stand in the way? When are the moments when it will be difficult? I like to use an OHS example. You've just had OHS training, or the people within your manufacturing firm have just had OHS training. And they've been told the limits of what they should be lifting on their own and what they should be doing with another person, and what they should be using a forklift for, and so on and so on. And so they're back at work, and it's the end of their shift, and they just want to finish. They just want to punch out. And they identify this moment as a moment when they're likely to just lift the box anyway, despite the fact that there's a risk there. So you help them as part of at the conclusion of the training program, once they understand the content, to identify those moments where it would be easy to slip back into old habits, and then have them plan for what they will do in those moments. As we know that when people have a plan, have a way out, they're likely to identify those moments as the difficult moments, and then follow through on their plan, follow through on, okay, I was told that I made a plan, I committed that if I found myself in the situation where I was at the end of the shift and I really just wanted to lift the box, I had made a commitment to not doing this, to understanding that this could cause me some risk, and what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to go get my colleague and I'm going to ask for some support or assistance in lifting the box. Right? That's relapse prevention. Self-management is a very general technique. Self-management is it might involve a little bit of goal setting, but it's teaching people techniques for managing their own behaviors, having them think through what's to come, what types of things, what will happen when you go back to work, where might you apply this, can you identify some opportunities now where you might be able to apply this, and so on and so on. And the final technique that we have here is verbal self-guidance. This is a technique that I actually have tested quite a few times. And essentially, in the first day, you'll remember that we talked about the fact that you have an internal dialogue. We talked about this when we talked about social cognitive theory. We talked about the idea that there's a significant other that is a voice that's kind of in your head, that's kind of guiding you through tasks, saying this is something I can do, this is something I can't do, and here's how I'm going to do things. Well, verbal self-guidance asks you to identify that voice, that the types of thoughts that you think when you are approaching a task, and to understand what is a productive way of thinking about a given task, right? So you might, if I was doing a task where, let's use the box example again. If I was going, I might say in advance, and I might ask an employee to sit down with me to say, what did you learn in your training today? And they say, oh, I learned the limits of what you should lift and what you shouldn't lift. And so I would say, as the trainer or the manager, I might say, okay, so when you encounter a situation where you should be lifting a box of a certain weight, what are the types of things that go through your head? What are the types of things you initially think? And they would identify the thoughts as, oh, I just want to get out of here. I can lift this. I'm strong enough. This, I won't get hurt. This is ridiculous. Let me just do this and go home. And so then you would go through those thoughts and say, well, what's true, what's not true, what's helpful, what's not helpful, and then actively try and change your thoughts. And you've done this before, especially if you're an athlete. You've done this before, where perhaps you've been in a race or in a game, and you've actively tried to shift the way that you're thinking about something, and you start to think, no, I know I'm strong enough to lift this, but that's not the point. I don't want to get hurt here. This is not about, this is something on which I need a little bit of support, right? So I might, in a game, as an example, have, if I used to be a swimmer growing up, so as a swimmer, I would be on the block and I would think through, I might stand up there thinking, oh, this person beside me is very fast. They've beat me before. They're going to beat me again. I don't know why I'm up here. I should just, this is just ridiculous. I'm not looking forward to this race, and so on and so on. But athletes will try and actively change their thoughts to more helpful thoughts, like, I've been training really hard. I'm ready for this. I'm gonna swim the best race of my season, and so on and so on. All right, so these are transfer enhancement procedures, and when compared to one another, when tested against one another, there are some that actually are more effective than others, interestingly. And the ones that are more effective are the ones that actually tap into increasing self-efficacy. So verbal self-guidance turns out to be a very effective tool for helping people transfer skills into very difficult work environments, because they actively engage this self-efficacy for application, this increasing somebody's confidence in their ability to apply a task, right? Which is very different than my ability to do the task. I might feel very, very confident in my ability to negotiate. Let's say I do negotiations training quite frequently. I feel very confident in my ability to negotiate in the abstract and in these exercises within the classroom, but I don't always feel confident in a particular application of it in my job. So these types of techniques really are around increasing self-efficacy for application. Verbal self-guidance works in that way, self-management works in that way, and relapse prevention works in that way. They all increase self-efficacy. The one that does not increase self-efficacy is goal setting, interestingly. So the message from that would be, if you have a good transfer climate, a climate that is going to support the application of the newly learned skill, goal setting should be sufficient. You should just allow, at the end of the training program, help people to set appropriate goals and send them off into their world of work, knowing that the transport will support them through the application, or the climate rather will support them through the application. If you do not have a positive transfer climate, something you can measure, you will want to think about using a transfer enhancement procedure such as relapse prevention, self-management, or verbal self-guidance. You can do this as either the trainee, as an HR professional within an organization, or as a manager coaching individuals within the organizational setting. All right, that's your little brief update and enhancement on transfer enhancement procedures. Take care and see you next class.